Welcome to Talking Meds on the PrescQIPP podcast, engaging conversations about medicines-related dilemmas. I'm your host, Jonathan Underhill. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Talking Meds. I'm your host, Jonathan Underhill. I'm joined today by Sundus Jawad for the second in our series of podcasts called Caring About Medicines in Care Homes with Jonathan and Sundus. Sundus is a care homes pharmacist with over 25 years experience as a medicines optimization pharmacist and works at NHS Frimley. So we're going to talk about various issues around looking after people and their medicines who live and reside in care homes. So Sundus, what are we going to talk about today then?
Well, we're going to talk about medicine safety and how we can improve medicine safety in care homes and why we need to improve medicine safety in care homes.
So why is medicine safety a particular concern in care homes, and what's the challenges specific to care home settings?
So if we think about how many medicines are prescribed, so we know from the various data sets and information that we get from NHS BSA, and particularly the data that we've recently seen around prescribing patterns in care homes, we know that actually the majority of prescribing happens, or there's more polypharmacy prevalence, I should say, amongst our care home patients. So we know on average, care home residents are prescribed 7 medicines on repeat each month. And if you have a care home with 100 beds, that's 700 medicines that are needed to be administered safely every single day. And some of those medicines might be administered twice or even 3-4 times a day. So that's a lot of medicines administration. So the likelihood of a medication error increases with the number of medicines that are being administered or being prescribed for that particular individual. And we know this must be true because there's actually evidence. We know from the prevalence and economic burden of medication errors in the NHS in England report, which was a few years ago, I think it was 2018, we know that that kind of identified that in England alone, there must be around 237 million errors happening each year in our healthcare systems. And actually what it identified was that 99 million of those errors, so the vast majority, over 41% of all medication errors happen in care homes. And when they looked at those particular errors, those 99 million errors in care homes, what they found that over 70% of them occurred at the time of medicines administration. So we know that the risk of medication error is really high because of polypharmacy, because of the vulnerability of that particular patient group, but because also the people administering the medicines are having to juggle not just medicines administration, but everything else that goes with managing the medicines for care home patients.
Yeah, and also I guess the types of medicines that are used are the usual suspects where it comes to medication errors. The data that's come from Munir Pir Mohammed's work and Tony Avery's work shows that the medicines that are most responsible for medication errors and safety concerns are things like diuretics, non-steroidals, the damned drugs, psychotropics, other medicines like that, which I presume are very prevalent in care homes. You must see those sorts of medicines every day, multiple times a day.
Yeah, absolutely, we do. And that's partly because, most of the people living in care homes are older patients. And we know that with aging, people are more likely to develop multiple health problems and conditions. And to manage those multiple health problems and conditions, they're going to be prescribed medication. And so the likelihood of polypharmacy increases with age, and we know that multiple health problems or multimorbidity is highly associated with polypharmacy. So yeah, we're going to see lots of different types of medicines prescribed to manage all of these health problems, whether it's heart failure, diabetes, COPD, whatever it might be. And then we've got this added factor which we need to think about, because this is a patient group which have left their own homes, so that where they lived for maybe 40, 50 years, sometimes might have even given birth to their children in this home, buried pets in their garden, and they've lived in a property for 60 years, and now somebody has decided that they're no longer able to live there safely and they need to move into a care home. So then not only are we managing their heart failure, their diabetes, their COPD, they've now gone into this new environment and their mood has changed. And we might now also need to manage mental health issues or depression, etc. So yes, we end up with a significant amount of polypharmacy for different reasons. And it's, how do we manage that? But then we also have a kind of another added dimension to the complexity around prescribing so many medicines for older people. And that's, we know that as people age, their physiology changes. So actually, their kidneys and their liver are no longer as efficient as they used to be. And so actually what we see is that medicines aren't cleared as efficiently in the human body. And so levels are likely to go up, and with increased frailty as well, their vulnerability to the adverse effects of medicines also increases. So it's a kind of, not only are they prescribed more medicines, but they're also more vulnerable to the adverse effects of these medicines, particularly if they're on a cocktail of a number of things. So yeah, absolutely right. There are numerous reasons for why people become more susceptible to adverse effects.
Yeah, it's a real heady mix, isn't it? People say that one of the most stressful things you do in your life is moving house. Everyone who's a new resident in a care home has just moved house, and they may well have moved house in circumstances that they weren't particularly keen on on doing, almost not quite against their will, but where there's been a reluctance to move, hasn't there? So that's obviously going to affect your mood. There's also, as you say, that physiology, the change in physiology, the frailty, the number of medicines that people are on. And actually, I also, again, this is my assumption that when you get into a care home, it may be that your amount of physical activity changes. You're maybe not moving about as much as you used to, and obviously that can have an effect on your physiology as well. I remember when we were talking to Lucy Pollock about in the series we did, we talked about angina medicines, and somebody who's been on angina medicines for a long time, let's say nitrates or Nicurandil, and if they're not moving anymore, then they're not going to get angina attacks. So there's lots to think about, I presume, within care home settings. So we're always interested in stories, aren't we? So I'd be really interested in any stories that you have about any particular issues that you've come across over your many years of working within care home settings that have stuck with you, and that maybe you use and talk to other people about as a teaching example. So what sort of things have you come across?
Yeah, so I think the one of my really early kind of stories around medicine safety is calamine lotion. Actually, it involves calamine lotion, and this was a residential home a long time ago in another part of England, let's say the east of England, where there were some concerns about hospital admissions from that particular care home, lots of diarrhea, vomiting, and they weren't quite sure. It wasn't, not typical of kind of viral symptoms. So they were worried it might have been a kind of poisoning or, to be honest, I didn't get much information, but they just said, we don't think it's viral, and we're worried that maybe somebody's administering either excessive medicines or there is a chemical leak or something. Could you just go and check? Because the local A&E department are a bit concerned. Could you go and see if they're managing the medicines properly? And off I went. And first time I'd been into this care home, noticed in the trolleys that there were these small bottles of calamine for every single resident, just about. And so I asked one of the members of staff, said, oh, this is interesting. There's lots of calamine lotion, not seen that. I was thinking, I've not seen this in other care homes. And I thought, it is the summer. And I wonder if it's to do with, with it being the summer, insect bites. And so we had a barbecue a few weeks ago and everybody got bitten, and the doctor prescribed this calamine lotion, and we've been administering it. So I said, okay, that's okay, that makes sense. I was thinking, oh, this makes sense. So I said, okay, but why is it in the trolley? Normally we would keep external products out of a trolley. And she said, well, we've been giving it to the residents. So I said, okay, what do you mean you've been giving it to the residents? I said, oh, we shake the bottle really well. We pour out on the spoon and we give it to them. Oh my God. So they've been orally, ingesting this calamine lotion that explains the upset tummy and sickness that everybody's ended up in the hospital with. So what was really interesting is when we spoke to the staff and when I looked at the labels, it actually said use as directed, because that's how the GP had prescribed the calamine lotion. And bearing in mind, it came in a smooth brown bottle, not ribbed, so not really clear that this was for kind of external use, because, they're just small, ready-made products. You just stick the label on and it's dispensed, etc. So when I spoke to the staff, I said, okay, it says here, use as directed. Were you given instruction on how to administer the calamine lotion? And they said, well, we were just told 3 or 4 times a day. And so we just assumed shake the bottle because we noticed it settles. We just shake the bottle and pour it out like we do with that other medicine that comes in a brown bottle. When I looked and they showed me, it was magnesium trisilicate. This is 20 years ago. So yeah, use as directed. This is why we don't like that particular instruction.
So I guess it's that thing that couldn't possibly happen. I remember hearing stories of people taking suppositories and leaving them in the foil. So when you think, it's that sort of, you have to, can't be pejorative here, but how could you have been so stupid as to think that? But sometimes that's what happens and again, when people are in a hurry and it's that halt thing, that they're hungry, maybe angry, late, tired. That's when you make silly mistakes and you don't think, and that's another classic example of, well, if somebody else has done it that way, that must be the way to do it, and not maybe a junior member of staff not questioning a senior member of staff because the senior member of staff is just doing it that way. Oh, that must be right then. I thought calamine lotion you just put on your skin, but obviously this person's doing it. They must know what they're doing. And so there's lots in there for that sort of medication safety sort of awareness thing, isn't there?
Yeah, and if you think about 20 years ago, and this is approximately 20 years ago, that we didn't have the medication training that we have today for carers and those that work in care homes. We didn't have guidance, so we've got the nice guidance now on medicines management in care homes. So people, it was kind of the blind leading the blind, and it was kind of whenever they got ad hoc support or training. If I give you another example of a medication safety incident, which was more recent, so about 6 years ago, we were called to support a care home that was a number of medication errors had been identified in a CQC visit. So it was shared with our local authority safeguarding team, and they said, oh, CQC have identified a number of concerns. Could you go and just, do an audit or have a look and just share with us what support they might need? And if you could provide any support, we'd be really grateful. And that was kind of the function of our team to support local care home providers at the time. And yeah, so, we've moved on from administering calamine lotion orally to administering insulin using a BD syringe and extracting the insulin from a pen cartridge. So what the care staff were actually doing, where instead of inserting the insulin pen cartridge into an insulin pen, they were actually withdrawing the insulin from the cartridge into another syringe. And I think something else to be mindful of is that we assume that all nurses are very familiar with all medicines, and that's definitely not the case in care homes. So, I've come across nurses who've worked in antenatal care and have decided for a career change and now moved to work into a care home. So, previously working with tiny babies, now working with very elderly people in care homes. So we talk about different medicines, different needs, etc. We have nurses that come from mental health backgrounds, and now they're administering. I've had nurses say, my background is mental health. I used to work in this mental health trust, but I'm quite worried that I now have to administer all these cardiology medicines. I don't know if I'm doing it right, and I don't know if if we're administering in the way that's intended. So that's another challenge.
I mean, I guess it's almost that conversation about the difference between specialism and generalism, because people who work in a care home have to have a generalist approach. They have to have a good knowledge of all the sorts of medicines and all the sort of things that you come across in a care home setting, not just mental health, not just cardiology, not just diabetes. So if you've got a background where you've worked in a specialism for a number of years, having that sort of generalist training is really, really important as well. So I guess from a pharmacist point of view, going into a care home, delivering educational sessions, it's almost, I guess you have to start at the very basics and assume very little knowledge of the generality of the sorts of things that you come across in care homes. So in terms of sort of training packages and things like that, and the sort of educational events that you would put on, Sundus, you and your team would put on, is that the sort of thing you do? You look at sort of like improving general skills and general awareness of common medication areas, and then think about some of the more complicated and medicines, again, as we said before, where there are specific safety concerns.
Yeah, so in Frimley, we offer training sessions every so often. So I think it's every 6 weeks. Marvelous Medicines is what we call our medicines training sessions. They're an hour long, and we open it up to all the care staff in our local area. And what we usually do is we kind of go through one of our good practice guidance topics, or we might go over a topic where we know locally some of our care homes might have been picked up on a few issues with. So for example, it might be that they've had two care homes might have had CQC visits, and they've been kind of advised to look at their covert administration policy, or there isn't a covert administration policy, but there is covert administration and they need support with that. So we'd kind of think, these two care homes struggled with that. Maybe there are others. Let's do a training session on this particular topic. And then we'd bring in our good practice guidance resources into that training so that we can refer people and signpost them to relevant resources, etc. So yeah, we try and make it really interactive. I'm really lucky. I've got a fantastic team that are very experienced, both pharmacists and pharmacy technicians. And the turnout is always incredible. And the feedback, we always get feedback, is always really positive. And when we go and do our visits, what we can see is that actually people do start to implement their learning. And that makes it really, really it's really kind of number one, reassuring, but also on a kind of professional level, fulfilling as well, because we can see that it's benefiting people on the ground.
Yeah, I speak to lots of people who care homes pharmacists, and they're the words that they use back to me: rewarding and fulfilling, in terms of those sorts of things. So if people are interested, if there are other care homes pharmacists out there who are interested in putting on educational sessions, are there any resources that people can use? Are there any shared resources? Where would people go to get good education materials for this?
Yeah, so at the now that we have the National Pharmacy Care Home faculty, we've just started to develop a resource webpage. So lots of resources on the resource webpage already, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to add more. But yeah, and we're sharing resources and any kind of materials through our various networks. So not just through the faculty, but we're hoping that the faculty will be the kind of main route through which people will be able to share resources and work that they've done and any learning. Actually, a really good example of where there has been good sharing of resources is we got contacted, this was a while ago, probably well over a year ago, by a fantastic pharmacy technician in the north, in Lancashire, Jane Shanahan, who's a pharmacy technician, works really closely with care homes. And she said, I've noticed this resource on the Frimley Care Homes webpage, your medicines reconciliation, good practice guidance. Would you mind if we borrowed this or we adapt it and use it locally? And we said, absolutely, that's what it's there for. Please use as you like. And what she went and did was actually, she went a step further and used it she kind of developed some OSCEs. So she was doing some training, kind of OSCE type training with her care home staff. And I think they linked in the local college where they do some training for social carers or social care. I think there's a social care certificate. So kind of incorporated it into that. And Jane then got in touch to say, this is how I've used your this resource that your team developed, this medicines reconciliation template. And it was just fantastic. So I said, to our technician, could you please find out from Jane how she's managed to do this? Because it's incredible. And we're now kind of delivering OSCEs using the original Frimley Medicines Reconciliation template. And really, really, really great news. Only, I think, last week, she got back in contact to say, Sundus, just to make you aware that Medicines Reconciliation template has now been commissioned by Lancashire County Council, and it's going to be shared with all care homes across the entire county. So they're all going to be using this fantastic Medicines Reconciliation template. So and it's such a lovely example where, a resource has been developed on one side of the country, been adapted by another team in another part of the country, and now is being rolled out, and we're all learning from each other, and that's the beauty, isn't it, of working and collaborating.
It is. I mean, that's very much the philosophy at PrescQIPP as well. It's sort of like that do once and share, and in the SPS service as well. It's very much that sort of like, why would you want 150 different organisations going off and doing something when you can maybe do it once, share it, and then have local adaptation of that to make sure that it's fit for purpose for your own locality. So we'll put some links in the show notes to the PCPA faculty page. We'll put some links to the PrescQIPP materials as well. Yeah, I know you've mentioned Jane Shanahan previously in her work. I think it would be great to get Jane as a guest on here. Actually, the three of us can have a really good conversation about the role of pharmacy technicians as part of the multidisciplinary team as well. So we can maybe explore that as well. Sundus, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much. There's loads in there. The example of the calamine lotion, it's just like it just makes you think, doesn't it? That things like that can happen, and sometimes you just have to remind people about some of the very, very basic things that we take for granted as pharmacists, because we've grown up like that. We've done a 5-year degree now, and medicines are our life, but we have to remember that for some people, even just the simple messages sometimes get missing, and those mistakes can happen. You can't prevent everything, but I think doing some education with staff, it's got to be a good investment of resources to do that, to try and prevent those sorts of things happening, to improve people's knowledge, to look after those precious people who live in care homes. So thanks very much, Sundus, and we'll see you again next time for the next episode of Caring About Medicines and Care Homes with Jonathan and Sundus. Thanks for listening, guys. Cheers.